My parents ignored my emergency surgery, calling it drama for attention, while they celebrated my brother's new car. A week later, they asked me for $32 to save their house. Their faces turned pale when my name is Sloan Whitfield. I am 34 years old and I am a physical therapist, which means I spend my working days helping people rebuild what their bodies have lost. I know how to assess damage. I know how to read a situation and identify what is actually broken versus what just feels broken. I know the difference between pain that is manageable and pain that is telling you something important. This is the story of a Friday night when my appendix tried to tell me something important, and my family decided it was inconvenient. And what I found 7 days later when I finally sat down and looked at the numbers I had been carrying for 6 years. The number was $61,400. It took me about 40 minutes to add it up. It should not have taken me that long. But some numbers, you add slowly because you keep expecting the total to change. It did not change. I need to tell you who we are before I tell you what happened, because the surgery night makes no sense without the years before it. My parents, Diane and Gerald Whitfield, are in their late 50s. My father worked in commercial insurance for 30 years and retired at 61 with a pension that covered the basics. My mother managed the household, which she did well and efficiently, and she has a talent for making a room feel comfortable that I genuinely admire. They are not bad people. I want to be precise about that. They are people who built a system without naming it, and the system ran for so long that they stopped being able to see it from the outside. The system was this: my brother Dex was the one who needed, I was the one who managed. My mother had said this to me directly, once at a family dinner 3 years before the surgery. She was talking about dividing responsibilities in a general way, or appearing to, and she said, "You've always been the steady one. Sloan, we lean on you because we know you can take it." She meant it as a compliment. I received it as one. I nodded and said thank you and moved on to the next topic, because that was the kind of statement that felt like recognition, the kind you are grateful for. I did not understand, until much later, that it was also a permission slip, not one I had signed, one that had been written for me and that I had never looked at closely enough to question. Dex is 3 years younger than me. He has the particular quality that certain people develop when they grow up, understanding that their needs will be anticipated, addressed, and buffered by other people's efforts. He is not lazy. He works, he earns, he shows up. But somewhere along the way, he internalized the idea that the family's resources existed to help him look stable. And my parents internalized the idea that helping him look stable was their function, and I internalized the idea that my function was to be the thing the family leaned on when the resources ran thin. I did not choose this. I did not know it was happening. I simply kept being the person who managed. The clearest version of the pattern arrived when I was 26, the year I graduated from my PT program and got my first real job. My mother called 2 weeks after my start date to say Dex had gotten into a fender bender and the insurance gap was going to cost them $900 they did not have. She said it the way she always said things like this, carefully, with a preamble about not wanting to bother me. And then, the number. And then a silence that was not quite a request, but functioned as one. I sent the $900. It was 2 days' pay, and I sent it without thinking about it very hard, because that was what you did for family, and because I was 26 and newly employed and believed that helping was something you did when you could and declined when you couldn't, and that the balance would eventually work itself out. The balance did not work itself out. It accumulated. When the furnace needed replacing in the winter of my 29th year and my parents did not have the repair funds, I sent $4,200. When my father had a prescription gap in the year after his retirement, I sent $1,200 over 4 months. When the roof started leaking the following spring, my mother called me and said they were getting estimates. And I said I would help, and I sent $4,600 toward the final bill. The roof leaked again 3 years later. I sent $1,800 toward the second repair. Dex had a car accident the year he turned 27. He was fine. The car was not. My parents covered his insurance gap because he was between jobs and they said he needed the support right now. I sent $2,900 2 weeks later, when my mother mentioned the credit card balance had gotten away from them. She did not connect the two things explicitly. I did not ask if they were connected. I sent the money. I sent these amounts the way you send money to people you love who are having a hard time. Without ceremony. Without a ledger. Without once thinking that I was building a record of anything. Because I was not trying to build a record. I was trying to help. What I did not understand was that when you help without recording, the help becomes invisible. Not to you necessarily, but to the people receiving it. It stops being help and starts being an assumption, and when something is assumed, it is no longer received with gratitude. It is received the way you receive something that is simply there, that has always been there, that will continue to be there, because it always has been. I had made myself into something assumed. That was the error, not the helping. The not looking at what the helping had become. Priya was the one who found me, in the sense that she was the one who was there. I had been having pain in my lower right side since Tuesday. As a physical therapist, I spend my working life assessing pain and locating its source, and determining whether it requires intervention or monitoring. I knew from Tuesday that this pain was in the category of worth watching. I also knew, from the rest of my life that week, that I did not have time for it to be something that required more than watching. I was covering 2 other therapists' caseloads, while one was at a conference and the other was out sick. I had documentation deadlines Friday afternoon. I had 3 patients who were at critical junctures in their recovery and needed consistency. I had a dentist appointment I had already rescheduled twice and was about to reschedule again. I watched the pain through Wednesday and Thursday and told myself it was muscular, which I knew by Thursday evening was not accurate. By Friday morning I knew. By Friday afternoon, the knowing had moved into the category of you need to act on this tonight. I finished my documentation. I called the clinic's after-hours line. They told me to go to the ER. I sat in my car in the clinic parking lot for about 4 minutes, running a quick inventory of who I could call, and then I called Priya. Because she was the one I thought of first. And because she lived nearby, and because I had learned over the 3 years we had worked together that she was the kind of person who answered when you called. She was at my door in 14 minutes. She drove me to St. Aldrich. She sat in the ER waiting room while they ran the labs and did the CT scan and confirmed what I already knew: the appendix was inflamed and it needed to come out that night. She went home to let her dog out and came back. She was there when I woke up in recovery, and she was there at 2 a.m. when they told me I could go home. During the 4 hours between when we arrived at the ER and when they took me into surgery, I sent 3 messages to my mother. I sent one to my father, which said, "Dad, I'm having emergency surgery tonight. I hope you see this." I sent one to my brother. It said, "Dex, I'm at St. Aldrich, appendix, emergency surgery tonight." My father's message went unread for 6 hours. Dex sent a thumbs up at 11:15, which was after I was already out of surgery and in recovery. My mother's response, the one that came at 9:47, is the one I have already told you about. Priya was in the waiting room when they brought me out. She had gone home to let her dog out and come back, which I only found out later. When I woke up, she was the one sitting in the chair beside the bed, and she had brought coffee for herself and a magazine she was not reading, and when I opened my eyes, she looked at me and said, "How do you feel?" I said I felt like someone had taken something out of my body. She said that was technically accurate. We stayed in the recovery unit for 2 more hours. At 2 in the morning, Priya drove me home. She helped me up the stairs and into my apartment and made sure I had my discharge paperwork and my prescription and a glass of water on the nightstand. Then, she said goodnight and went home. My family did not call that night. My mother texted at 10:45 Saturday morning to ask how I was doing, which I answered with fine, because I did not have the energy for anything more specific. The week between the surgery and the phone call was ordinary in the way that recovery weeks are ordinary, careful, slow, full of small calculations about what I could and could not do. I am a physical therapist. I understand recovery as a process with stages, and I tried to apply to my own body the same patience I apply to my patients. It was harder than I expected. Not the physical part, which was manageable. The other part. I had been alone in the hospital for 11 hours. Not dramatically alone, not conspicuously alone, but alone in the specific way that you are alone when you look at the chair beside your bed, and it is occupied by a colleague who came because she heard you needed a ride, not by the people you had called. I kept returning to that image in the days after, the way you return to a discrepancy in a patient's gait. Something is off. The question is what it is telling you. I worked half days from home on Monday and Tuesday. Priya texted on Monday morning to ask how I was. My colleague Dara texted Tuesday afternoon. My clinic supervisor sent a brief email saying, "Take the time you need." 3 people from my professional life checked in during the first 3 days. My family did not. My parents sent a fruit basket on Monday. It arrived in a cardboard box. My mother texted to say she hoped I liked it. On Wednesday evening, my brother posted a photo to the family group chat. He was standing beside a black pickup truck in the dealership lot, grinning the way he grinned when something he had wanted for a long time had finally materialized. The truck was new and large and had the particular sheen of something that had been selected with care. The caption said, "Finally, a man needs a proper vehicle." My mother replied with 3 heart emojis and a celebration emoji. My father replied, "That's my boy." 4 more family members added reactions. 2 cousins sent congratulations. An aunt said it was beautiful. I read the messages. I went back and read the 3 I had sent from the hospital waiting room and the ER and the pre-op bay. I read my mother's response to those, the one that had arrived at 9:47, "Not tonight. Dex just got the truck. Don't make this drama for attention." I did not reply to the truck photo. I put the phone down and finished my dinner and went to bed. What I did not know, at that moment, was what Priya would tell me 2 weeks later, after she had run into my cousin Renata at a birthday party. Renata had been at the dealership celebration. What she told Priya, and what Priya told me with the careful directness that characterized everything she did, was this. At the dealership that Friday night, my mother had mentioned to several family members that Sloan had texted about going to the hospital, that she had been dramatic about it, that it was probably nothing, and Sloan tended to make things bigger than they were. Drama for attention. Said in a dealership showroom. While I was being prepped for emergency surgery. I filed this. Not with anger. Exactly. Anger came later. At that point, I filed it the way I filed clinical observations that did not yet fit a pattern, but that I did not want to lose. I did not have anywhere to put it yet. But I held on to it. The phone call came on Friday at 11:20 in the morning. 7 days exactly after the surgery. I was doing documentation at my desk and I saw my mother's name on the screen, and I answered without thinking much about it, because she called on Fridays sometimes. She said, "Honey, we need to talk about something serious." I said, "Okay." She said, "Your father and I are 3 months behind on the mortgage. The bank sent a final notice. We need $32,000 by the end of the month or we lose the house." I did not say anything. She said, "We know it's a lot. But family helps family, Sloan. You've always understood that." I sat with the phone against my ear and looked at the wall in front of my desk. On the wall there was a whiteboard where I tracked my current patient's progress goals. One of them said, "In my own handwriting, strength is built in increments, not all at once." I told my mother I would think about it. She said, "We need an answer by Monday." I said I would call her Sunday. Then I ended the call and sat at my desk for a long time without moving. That evening, I made dinner and ate it at the kitchen table and did not call my parents back and did not think very hard about what I was going to do next. I let Friday evening be Friday evening. I had learned in my work that some assessments need to happen after you have rested because the tired version of your judgment will miss things. I slept well, which surprised me. In the morning, I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. I want to be clear about something before I tell you what I found. I am a physical therapist. I assess bodies for damage every day. I know what compensation looks like when it has been running long enough to become invisible. A patient will come in with a shoulder problem, and the actual source is their hip. Because the hip adapted to an old injury years ago, and the shoulder has been compensating for the hip ever since, and the whole system has been quietly reorganizing itself around a problem nobody named. You only see the compensation when you finally take a proper look at the whole picture. I had been compensating for 6 years. I had never taken a proper look. I pulled the full export of my transfer history for the past 72 months. It downloaded as a spreadsheet. I formatted it, sorted it by payee, filtered for the transfers that had gone to my parents or to family-related expenses I had covered. I did this, methodically, the way I document a patient's range of motion. Degree by degree. Number by number. The first page of the printed summary looked like this: furnace repair, $4,200, roof contribution, $4,600, father prescription gap, $1,200, car insurance after Dex's accident, $2,900, Dex temporary help, rent shortfall, $3,500, mother dental emergency, $2,100, second roof repair, $1,800, property tax shortfall, $3,900, father's back procedure co-pay, $1,600, Dex car down payment contribution, $4,100, various household and emergency transfers, $31,500, total $61,400. I sat with the number for a while. The kitchen was quiet. The coffee I had made was cold. I did not drink it. $61,400 over 72 months. That was an average of $852 per month, every month, for 6 years. Moving from my account into the system that I had been calling my family's well-being, but that, looked at plainly, was a structure that required my output to function. I thought about what $61,400 would have been if I had put it somewhere else. Not as a complaint, more as an exercise in understanding what the number actually represented. A down payment on a property. A year and a half of mortgage payments on a small house. 6 years of maxed retirement contributions. A number that had a shape, a weight, a set of things it could have become. Instead, it had become roof repairs, prescription gaps, car insurance, Dex's various shortfalls, and the quiet maintenance of a family that called me the steady one. I stood up and went to the bathroom and stood at the sink with the cold water running over my wrists for a few minutes. That is something I do when I need my thinking to slow down. It works, most of the time. Then I went back to the kitchen and kept looking. Then I went back through the spreadsheet and found the date on the Dex card down payment contribution. It was logged as February of the year 3 years prior. I checked the family group chat on my phone, scrolling back to that same month. Found it in under 2 minutes. My mother, posting a photo of Dex at a different dealership, a smaller car that time, with the caption "So proud." We helped make this happen. We helped make this happen. I thought about that phrase for a while. I thought about what we meant in that sentence, because the $4,100 that appeared in my transfer history in February of that year had come from my savings account, and it had gone to my parents' joint account, and from there it had moved to a car dealership deposit. 3 links in a chain. None of the 3 links were labeled clearly, but all 3 existed in the records. Then, I looked at the month of Dex's new truck. The black pickup from the photo. The celebration on the Friday night of my surgery. In that same month, I had sent my parents $1,600 for what my mother described as a temporary gap. I had sent it without asking questions, because that was what I did. The transfer had cleared on a Tuesday, 3 days before the dealership celebration. I did not have enough evidence to say with certainty where my $1,600 went after it entered my parents' account. I did not need that certainty. What I had was a pattern, and the pattern was clear. Every time Dex needed something that looked like success, the family found a way to provide it. And the family's resources, when it came down to the actual math, were partially mine. I printed the full history, 11 pages. Then I printed something else, my hospital discharge papers from the Friday of the surgery. Emergency appendectomy. Admission time, 1947. Discharge time, 0122. My name. The date. In the emergency contact field, Priya Anand, colleague, not my mother, not my father, not my brother, my colleague. The person who showed up. I set both documents on my kitchen table, 11 pages of transfer history and 1 page of discharge paperwork. I looked at them for a while. Then I went to the junk drawer by the refrigerator and took out the hospital wristband. I had cut it off the morning after I came home and put it in the drawer, without thinking much about it. The way you put things you are not ready to throw away, but are not sure what to do with. I held it for a moment. My name on white plastic. The date. The admission time. I put it back in the drawer. Then I sat at the kitchen table and drafted 3 options on a piece of paper, not because I was going to offer them all, but because I needed to see them written out before I decided what I was going to say on Sunday. My parents arrived at my apartment at 2 in the afternoon on Sunday. I had not told them why I wanted them to come in person. I had said I wanted to talk about the house situation and that I would prefer to have the conversation face to face. My mother had said of course, and my father had said we'll be there, and neither of them had sounded surprised or suspicious. Which told me something about how they expected the conversation to go. They expected the conversation to go the way it had always gone. Sloan assesses the problem. Sloan agrees to help. Sloan transfers the funds. The problem resolves. I had made coffee. There were cups on the kitchen table. There were also 2 stacks of paper. My mother came in first, the way she usually moved through spaces she was comfortable in. She sat down across from me. My father took the chair to her right. They both looked at the papers on the table, and then at me. "We really appreciate you being willing to help," my mother said. "I know the timing isn't great, with everything you've been going through." I said, "I want to talk about a few things before we discuss the house." She said, "Of course." I pushed the discharge papers across the table first. "That's from the hospital," I said. Friday, the 8th. Emergency appendectomy. I was admitted at 7:47 in the evening. I came out of surgery just after midnight. My mother looked at the paper. My father looked at the paper. Neither of them spoke. The emergency contact field is blank except for my colleague Priya, I said. That's the person who drove me to the ER and waited while I was in surgery and drove me home afterward. I let that sit for a moment. I am a physical therapist. I know what silence does to a room when it is allowed to exist. I let it exist. Then I pushed the second stack across. This is my bank transfer history, I said. 72 months. I went through it Friday night. It took about 40 minutes to compile the relevant transfers. I turned to the first page. The summary page. The one with the labeled amounts. I've totaled everything I've sent to you or covered on behalf of the family since I was 28. The number is $61,400. My mother's hands went still on the table. My mother's face lost its color first, not all at once. Slowly, the way color drains from a room when someone pulls the curtains shut. My father looked at the number, then at the discharge papers, then back at the number. For the first time in 6 years, neither of them had a response ready. My father looked at the total the way my patients look at their range of motion measurements when they are worse than expected. The expression of someone confronting a fact they cannot argue with. I pointed to the line 3/4 of the way down the page. This line, I said. $4,100. February. That's the month you posted the photo of Dex at the dealership. The caption said you helped make it happen. Neither of them said anything. And this, I said, finding the month of the truck. $1,600. Transferred the Tuesday before the dealership celebration, the Friday I was in surgery. The room was doing what rooms do when the numbers become real. Not silent exactly. Something more specific than silence. The particular quality of a space where the facts have arrived and there is nothing left to arrange around them. My mother said, "Sloan, we've always tried to be fair." I looked at her. $61,400, I said. That's not a complaint. I sent every one of those transfers because I chose to. But you're asking me for $32,000 more. And before I answer that, I needed you to see what the past 6 years actually look like when you put them on paper. My father said, "We didn't realize it had added up to that much." I said, "I know." My mother said, "We've been under so much pressure. With the house, and Dex getting back on his feet, and your father's health." "I know," I said again. "That's why I sent the money." She opened her mouth and then closed it. "Sloan," my mother said, "we never asked you to keep score." I looked at her for a moment. "No," I said, "you just called every time the score got expensive." She did not answer that. "I want to talk about the $32,000, I said. "I'm not going to say no outright. But I am going to say that I'm not sending another dollar before we talk about what happens after this, because there is no version of this where I send $32,000 and the pattern just continues." My father looked at the papers. He had not looked away from them since I pushed them across. "You were right about something," I said. I looked at my mother. "You've said, over the years, that I was the steady one. That you leaned on me because you knew I could take it." She nodded. "Just slightly." "I was steady," I said. "I just didn't know you'd been leaning that hard for that long." The room was still. I put 3 options on a separate sheet of paper and slid it across. Option 1. They sell the house, which clears the mortgage and leaves them free of the debt without my involvement. Option 2. They speak to Dex about refinancing the truck, which would free up the equity for a short-term bridge while they stabilized. His truck was paid for in part with money that came through our family system. He was part of the system. Option 3. I would contribute toward the mortgage, but only after they signed a simple repayment acknowledgement for the $61,400 already transferred. Not a legal document designed to extract money. A written acknowledgement that the money existed, that it came from me, and that any future assistance would be tracked the same way. My mother looked at the third option for a long time. My father said, "The third option. What does that look like practically?" I said, "It looks like a conversation with your financial advisor, or Gideon, or whoever you trust to help you think through what you actually owe versus what you've been assuming is a gift. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not trying to sue you. I'm asking for acknowledgement before I continue." My mother said, "This feels very formal." I said, "The surgery felt very alone." She looked at the discharge paper again. She looked at it for a long time. The paper sat on the table between us the way facts sit in rooms, without apology, without drama, simply present and available. My father had not spoken in several minutes. He had his hands folded on the table, which was how he sat when he was thinking, rather than defending. I had seen that posture before. It was different from his other postures, and I recognized it as the one that sometimes produced honesty. He picked up his phone. He looked at it for a moment. Then, he dialed. The call connected on the second ring. "Dex," my father said. "I need you to hear something." He put the phone on speaker and set it on the table between us. There was a pause on the other end. "I'm looking at $61,000, my father said. "Your sister sent it over 6 years. Transfers, all documented." The page in front of me shows the month you bought the first car and the month you bought the truck. Both months have transfers from Sloane's account. Silence from the phone. "Dad," Dex said finally. "I didn't know she." "I know you didn't know," my father said. "That's not an excuse." His voice was even. Not angry. Something more deliberate than anger. "We're asking her for $32,000 more. And she was in surgery last week, and nobody went." The silence on the other end of the call was different from the silence in the room. The room had the quality of people sitting with a truth they had received. The phone had the quality of someone receiving it alone. "I'm sorry, Sloane," Dex said. He said it to the phone, to the room, to me. "I'm sorry I didn't come to the hospital. I'm sorry about," he stopped. "I'll call my bank Monday." "About the truck." My father said, "Thank you." He ended the call. He set the phone on the table. He looked at his hands. He said, "We should have come." My mother said, quietly, "Yes, we should have." I let that sit. In my work, there are moments in a session when a patient finally acknowledges the compensation they've been running, and the acknowledgement itself is a kind of release, and the right response is not to fill the silence with the next thing, but to let the patient stay in the acknowledgement for a moment. This was that kind of moment. I let it be what it was. We talked for another hour. Not about resolution exactly, but about the practical shape of things. My father said he would call Dex. He said it with the directness of someone who has been avoiding a thing and has decided to stop avoiding it. My mother said she would contact their mortgage servicer first thing Monday and ask about the actual options available to them before any of us committed to anything. I said I would wait for those conversations before giving a final answer on my involvement. My mother looked at the 3 options I had written down. She looked at the acknowledgement option, the third one, for a while. "If I sign this," she said, "what does it mean to you?" I thought about that. "It means we're both looking at the same number," I said. "It means the money I've sent is real, not assumed, not invisible." Real, she nodded. Not agreement exactly, but recognition. When they stood to leave, there was a different quality to the room than when they had arrived. Not better, not worse, just more honest. The discharge papers and the transfer history were still on the table. I had not taken them back. I left them there. At the door, my mother turned. She looked at me for a moment with the expression of someone who has understood something they did not want to understand and is still in the early part of figuring out what to do with it. She said, "I love you, Sloane," I said. "I know, Mom." She left. My father paused for a moment behind her. He looked at me, and then he looked at the floor, and then he looked back at me. He said, "You deserved better than what we gave you that night." I said, "Thank you, Dad." He left. I stood at the door and listened to the elevator close. Then I went back to the kitchen and stood for a moment and looked at the 2 stacks of paper on the table. Then I cleared them up, carefully, and put each in its folder, and put the folders in the cabinet where I kept important documents. They went in the cabinet next to the lease and the insurance papers and the things that mattered and needed to be kept. That was where they belonged. In the weeks that followed, the conversations happened the way practical conversations happen when the people having them are trying to be honest rather than comfortable. Not smoothly, not without friction, but with the kind of effort that looks like people deciding to try. My father called Dex on a Tuesday. He did not tell me he was going to. He just did it. Dex spoke to his bank about the truck the following Monday, as he said he would. The refinancing did not produce everything my parents needed, but it produced a meaningful portion, and when combined with what they could pull together by renegotiating their payment plan with the mortgage servicer, the gap closed to a number that did not require me to compromise my financial position to bridge. I contributed nothing toward the mortgage until the acknowledgement was signed. After it was signed, I made one payment, smaller than $32,000, and documented against the total already owed. Not a rescue. An installment on a debt that now had a name. My parents signed the acknowledgement document 3 weeks after the Sunday conversation. My mother asked twice if it was really necessary, and I said yes both times, and on the third time she did not ask. She signed it in her careful handwriting, the same handwriting she had used on every birthday card she had sent me for 34 years. My father signed below hers. A notary from the financial advisor's office witnessed it. Nobody called it an accusation. Nobody called it a legal threat. We called it a record, which is what it was. Records are just the truth written down. There was one more consequence I did not anticipate. About 3 weeks after the acknowledgement was signed, my mother sent me a card. Not a text, an actual card, the kind she bought at the pharmacy and wrote in with a pen. The card said that she had been thinking about the fruit basket she sent when I came home from surgery, and that she understood now why it had not been the right thing to send. She said she was sorry for that, specifically for the fruit basket instead of showing up. I read the card twice and put it on the kitchen counter where I could see it while I made coffee in the mornings. I did not call her immediately. But I kept the card. Priya asked me, about a month after the surgery, how I was doing. We were eating lunch in the break room. She did not ask about the family situation, which she knew pieces of by then. She asked generally, "How are you doing?" I told her I felt like something had been removed and I was still learning what it was like to not have it pressing on me from the inside. She said that made sense. For an appendectomy. I said I didn't only mean the appendectomy. She looked at me for a moment. She said, "I know." Then, after a pause, "You can call me, you know, for other things, not just rides." I told her I knew. I meant it. She had been the name in my emergency contact field before the surgery because I had listed her the year before out of practical necessity and had not thought much about it. After the surgery, when I updated the rest of my paperwork, I kept her name there. Not out of inertia, out of accuracy. She was the person who showed up. That was the definition of an emergency contact. I had had the right person listed all along. I just had not understood, until I actually had an emergency, what it meant to have them there. 3 months after the Sunday kitchen table conversation, I went to the junk drawer by the refrigerator and took out the hospital wristband. It was still there, white plastic with my name printed on it in the hospital's clean sans serif font. The date. The admission time, 1947. I had cut it off the morning I got home from the hospital and put it in the drawer without much thought. The way you put things you are not sure about yet. The things that need a different category than trash, but that you cannot look at directly right now. I had looked at it a few times in the months since. Mostly in passing, when I was looking for scissors or a takeout menu. But I had not picked it up. I picked it up now. I held it in my palm. The plastic was smooth and clean. I thought about the anesthesiologist who had asked if I had someone in the waiting room, and about what I had told her and about what she had written on her clipboard. I thought about Priya at 2 a.m. helping me up the stairs. I thought about the wristband on my wrist in the recovery room, the thing that said, "This person is accounted for. This person is someone. This person has a name." I had been accounted for. I had just done the accounting myself. I was not angry, standing in my kitchen on a Sunday morning with the wristband in my hand. I had been angry in the weeks after the surgery, the kind that arrives when you finally stop explaining something away and let yourself feel the actual shape of it. That anger had done its work. It had moved through me and left. What I felt now was quieter. Not resolution, because family is not a thing that finishes. More like what happens in a rehabilitation session when a patient finally moves without the compensation they have been running so long they forgot it was there. The brace comes off. The body adjusts. It does not feel better immediately. It feels different. More honest. I had been compensating for 6 years. The compensation had cost $61,400 and a surgery night I spent alone. I put the wristband back in the drawer, not thrown away, back in the drawer in the category of things that were mine to decide about in my own time. I made coffee. The morning light was coming through the kitchen window the way it came on Sundays, low and clear. The kitchen looked like my kitchen. The coffee tasted like my coffee. I was the steady one. I had always been the steady one. The difference now was that steady was something I chose, not something I owed. Nobody had asked me to carry it that long. I had simply never understood, until now, that I was allowed to put it down. Share this with the person who is always the steady one. They need to know that steady is something you chose, not something you owe. Subscribe for more stories about quiet people who finally stopped managing what was never theirs to carry.